The question I have for you is, do you stress test your properties before purchasing them? Because the answer is you probably should. A property investing stress test is a financial analysis that helps investors evaluate the potential risks and rewards of a property investment. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit more in detail about this topic. Now, during my childhood, the conversation about property was very common. It was instilled into me at a young age that property is a good tool for creating wealth. But I also had it drilled into me that property can be very risky. You see, I looked up to my late grandfather and consider him as one of my role models in life. And my grandfather was always determined to achieve better in life, often through working incredibly hard, working long days, long weeks, and just generally with a drive of wanting more for our family. And during this process, he flipped many properties. He would purchase them, move in, add value, sell them, and obviously move on to the next deal. And as time went on, as things progressed, he went on to purchasing more than one property at once. And then in the early 90s, a large recession hit. Interest rates rose from 7% up to 15% within a very short period of time, and unfortunately he lost everything. And I share that private story with you as it's something to help you be aware of. Everything worth having in life does often come with an element of risk, and some people that I actually know of don't even like investing into anything because they feel it's too risky. So they end up leaving their money in the bank and forgetting that, inflation is so high right now that leaving your money in the bank is possibly the biggest risk you can take anyway. But for different reasons, people don't like risk. And ultimately it comes down to what age you are and what your appetite is towards that risk. But to get back on track, property can be an incredibly good asset to buy, incredibly good for building wealth. And the way to largely de-risk it is to stress test properties, not just when buying them, but also during the time that you own them. Stress testing an asset involves modeling various different scenarios to be able to determine how the investment would actually perform under different economic conditions. So if we actually start by talking about the main two economic conditions, that's when things are going well. So sometimes when the market is booming and the cost of the debt is low, when that happens, the interest rates are of course lower. And in this scenario, properties are often harder to purchase, normally because the purchase prices are higher, the demand for property is higher. But with that in mind, quite often you'll see that the cash flow is actually better and the properties provide more profit and a good return on investment. Now, the reverse of that is actually, of course, where the interest rates are high or they're rising, it's harder to actually find good cash flowing assets as the interest rates effectively ruin the profitability of a property, and this eventually has knock-on effects. The interest rates affect the whole market. It's homeowners as well as property investors. And in turn, this also has a knock-on effect to renters as well, because quite often the costs are passed over to them. Now, at this point in the video, to actually give you some useful pointers, I turned to the latest craze, which is the AI chat GPT, to give me some actionable answers. In fact, I searched the term property investing stress test, and this was the result. The goal of a stress test is to identify the potential weaknesses and vulnerabilities of an investment and to develop strategies to mitigate those risks. So to conduct a full property investing stress test, an investor can actually follow the following steps. And these steps that it gave was, number one, determine the initial investment cost. This includes the purchase price of the property, includes the deposit, the purchase costs such as stamp duty, survey, solicitors, etc., and any renovation or repairs that are needed. Number two, it says estimate your ongoing expenses, and this could include insurance, maintenance costs, property management fees, and any other expenses that are going to be incurred while owning the property on a monthly basis. Number three, it said estimate the potential rental income. Obviously, that's really important. Number four, analyze the cash flow and then subtract the ongoing expenses that we just discussed. So subtract them from the rental income to determine the net cash flow. This will give you an idea of how much cash the investment property will generate each month. Number five, model various scenarios. So test the investment's performance under different economic conditions. Now these could be, changes in interest rates, changes in rental prices, and maybe even the occupancy rates. This will help you identify potential risks and vulnerabilities in the investment that you're looking at. Number 6 is develop alternative strategies. So based on the results of the stress test that you've done, develop strategies to mitigate and improve the investment's performance. Now, a good example of this actually, which I was thinking of, might be that if you actually were reviewing properties that you already own, the stress test reveals maybe that your investment is vulnerable to changes in interest rates, then you might actually consider refinancing slightly earlier, paying the early repayment charge in order to lock in a better deal over a longer time period. You know, if you'd done this obviously 6 or 12 months ago, you might have seen the interest rates are potentially going to go up. You might have refinanced early, locked in a better rate, so on. So moving over to the whiteboard, because I wanted to show you a quick and easy way to stress test an average buy-to-let property and do this in a way in which we're actually focusing in on the fluctuation of, say, let's say an interest rate, because interest rates are the thing right now which are very relatable and they really are affecting the profitability of a property. So if we start with, let's say, you know, £100,000 buy-to-let property, which in northern parts of the UK or the Midlands, you know, you can get a buy-to-let property for £100,000. The majority of us are going to put a 75% buy-to-let mortgage on that, which means we're taking out debt of £75,000. Obviously, when we take out that debt, it's probably going to be arrangement fee. So let's say the arrangement fee is 2%, that'll be £1,500, and our total debt will be £76,500. So that's the total debt that we're taking out on the property. Now we need to know this because obviously we use that to be able to calculate the monthly payment with the fluctuating interest rate. So let's move on to actually the monthly operating of this property. So obviously we're going to have the income versus the expenses. So let's say this property in terms of rent can get £650. And let's say for the mortgage that we're going to use a 3.2% limited company mortgage. The good old days of the 3.2% mortgage. We didn't know they were the good old days, but now we do. That will now be £204. We'll have a managing agent, which at 10% plus VAT will be £78. And let's say insurance of £20. And that will give us a profit margin, net profit of 348. So that's our profit at 3.2%. Good buy-to-let property. Most of us would buy that every day of the week. If we now apply a 5.29% limited company mortgage, which is more relatable to the current times, you can get that at the time of making this video as a 5-year fixed. In fact, if anything, it's starting to come down slightly. Obviously, we'll have the same rent, so I won't change that, but our mortgage is now going to be £337 per month. At the 337, obviously we've got the same managing agent costs, same insurance, but our profit is now going to be less. Obviously, it's going to be 215. So at this point, this buy-to-let is starting to not look as good. It's not cash flowing as much. Still worth buying, but obviously if it goes any lower than that, we're really starting to get into a territory where we're at more risk. And that is why we stress test. We're going to stress test this property at 8%. The reason we're going to use 8% is because a lot of the banks use 8 or 8.5% to stress test you when you get a mortgage. 8% is also a place in which, you know, if we do go up in interest rates from where we currently are, this is where we could end up if it suddenly rose up quickly. So if we do the same thing again, the monthly interest only payment is now going to be £510, which is insane compared to the 3.2% rate. And our profit margin is now going to be £42. And although you might look at that and go, wow, £42, that's nothing, which it isn't much, it's still positively cash flowing. That's still income as opposed to going into the negative. So what we're doing when we're stress testing isn't looking about how bad we can make it. It's just going, right, does this property at 8% still produces a bit of income? Does it still wash its face and make a bit of money? And if it doesn't, if it goes into the negative, it's going to cost us money. Now we should think about, should we actually invest into this property or not? So a quick thing to note very quickly is that if you are using the buy, refurbish, refinance strategy, of course, you're buying a property, you're adding value, and then you're going out there to get the highest possible end value so that you can refinance your money out. Obviously, when you do that, you're putting the highest possible debt on the property as well. And therefore, you're going to have the highest potential monthly payment. So that when you start to apply this model, you'll actually find with the BRR model, buy, refurbish, refinance, your property probably won't stress test past about 6%. And that's very common. after 6% it starts to go into the negative. So don't panic if that does happen, if it does start to go negative after 6%. However, you need to assess your risk appetite, because if you aren't comfortable with that, you might need to start thinking about doing a different type of deal. You might need to start thinking about leaving more money in that deal, not refinancing at such a high price and putting so much debt on the property. Obviously, this is more for your traditional buy-to-let, single-let property. You buy it for 100, you rent it out for 650, you get that property rented straight away. If so, 8% is a fairly good way in which you can judge whether that property is hitting its markers or not. And there you have it. Don't forget to stress test your potential investments or even ones that you already own. And if you found this video useful, let me know in the comments. I'd really appreciate hearing that. And of course, as always, I will see you in the next week's video.